Our next presenter is Corey Maass. Corey has been building for the web since 1996 with a focus on WordPress since 2011. And he has started his first SaaS app in 2004. It's weird saying years without a 20 in front of it. Sorry. And he has launched dozens since. For over 10 years, he's combined his love for entrepreneurship and WordPress by building, launching, and selling numerous WordPress plugins and SaaS apps built on WordPress. Currently, he's focused on the OMGIMG WordPress plugin. Corey's talk is titled Picturing Success, Maximizing Image Engagement in WordPress. Discover how relevant and compelling images can boost views by 94% and significantly improve retention, SEO, and clicks on your site, blog, or WooCommerce store. We'll cover topics like file formats, optimal image sizes, mobile considerations, compression techniques, and the best tools for the job. And when we're done, you'll know how to create the perfect images for your WordPress website. Let's bring him on. Welcome, Corey.
Hello, hello.
Hi, Corey. Thanks so much for being here. Where are you located in the world?
Up in New Hampshire in the northeast of the United States.
Wonderful. Awesome. Okay, well, I'm going to bring on your slide deck and I'm going to let you take it away. I'm excited to learn.
Great. Thanks. So hello, everybody. I'm Corey. Presenting today, as Katie said, how to use images online and specifically in your WordPress site. How best to use images, how images are used, and how to get the most out of them to get the most success out of your website, because we all like success. Yay, success. As she mentioned, my name is Corey Maass. I live currently in a small city called Claremont in the state of New Hampshire in the northeast of the United States, where it has been 90 plus degrees Fahrenheit every day. Thankfully, the heat has finally broken. So for once, you're not going to be seeing sweat dripping from my head here. Like she said, I've been building websites since the 90s. I forgot that I actually gave specific years, which kind of dates myself. But you know, I've been around the internet for a very long time, and WordPress for about 13 years. But way back in the day, there was, and I consider myself mostly a developer now. But way back in the 90s, it wasn't so common to have somebody just be a developer. Most of us were making websites start to finish. And I actually started as a designer. I love photography. I love graphic design and that kind of thing. And so that in part led me to building my newest plugin starting last year called OMGIMG. I promise, not a pitch for OMGIMG, although you'll be seeing my t-shirt the whole time. So constant reminder, but I will only mention the plugin twice throughout this talk. Mostly we're going to be primarily focused on talking about images online. Hopefully you stand to learn a lot. So let's start at the very beginning. Not only what makes a good image, but what are images, right? What are images, broadly speaking? So you've kind of got two types, right? Like most of us think of photos, photography. We used to be able to say that we could call a photograph something that was taken with a camera. Obviously that's not so true now with things like AI. But often I think of them at least of it's some sort of rendering of something that might exist in physical space. And I only kind of define that so that when I'm talking about photos today during my talk, you have a sense of what I'm talking about. And then also graphics are the other type of image that generally we're going to see online. Things like illustrations, some people will say clip art, graphic design, and then also things like infographics, charts, graphs, things like that, right? But all of it can be used on your website, so we're gonna touch on all of it. So getting back to the big title here in front of you, what makes for a good image? Again, not to get too philosophical, but if you think about images largely exist for humans to consume them, right? Weird thing to say, but it's true. And so if there's a human involved, then generally there's going to be psychology involved. And so what makes a good image? Well, talking about psychology, things like colors and shapes that we consume are generally going to have an influence on emotions and behaviors and how we perceive an image, and again, whether it's good or bad. But some real high level things to think about, right? Like examples of the color red denoting danger, at least in Western cultures, or something like a square denoting stability, or circles denoting unity, things like that. And then part of that psychology is also because we are human. Generally, there are lots of little rules to think about. Like generally, we look for faces. So one of the right away, here's a little nugget, right? Images used online. Kissmetrics, a website that does a lot of analytics, quoted a case study that said 95%, if an image included a human face, they saw a 95% increase in conversions, rather than just like an infographic or something like that, right? So there's a lot of psychology that goes into what actually makes a good image online. And we'll get into some more specifics, but one of the things that I want to say right off the bat is, as we get into these specifics, you might feel overwhelmed. You might go, well, but I'm not a graphic designer or I'm not a photographer. The main thing that I'll say is, honestly, trust your eye, right? Like most of us are online all day, every day these days, and are consuming images. And I bet you have a pretty good sense of what you like and what you don't like, and what is a good image and what isn't a bad image. So worst case, yeah, trust yourself. And if that fails, you can always copy what other people do. If you have websites that you like, that you are trying to emulate, go see what they're doing. I'm not saying copy them or anything like that, but see what they're doing, see what works, and see if you can implement some of those things yourselves. So with all that said, there are some actual quote unquote rules for photography. Rules were made for breaking, as they say, but there are a few rules of thumb that you can keep in mind, especially when looking at photos, right? Photography. There's a thing called the rule of thirds. If you check out the image that I've got here on the left, an easy way to think of this: divide whatever you're looking at, right? Divide the frame you're looking at into a grid of 9 equal rectangles, and place the thing that you're most trying to focus on, the primary elements of that photo, either on the lines or at the intersections. So in an example of a picture I took of a flower in my garden, put the flower in the top left intersection. Pretty easy to do, easy to remember. Another easy trick is symmetry. So if you look at the adorable picture I have of my dog on the left, most of us are trained to do this anyway. If you're taking a picture of your niece in front of a fountain or whatever, you put her right in the middle. So symmetry is an easy way to get a compositionally good photograph most of the time. Look for balance between the elements in your photo, either through perfect symmetry, or I couldn't find a good example, but like if you've got light and dark, to kind of create a sense of symmetry in a photograph. Another couple, I've got 2 more for you. One more is called leading lines, where you use natural lines to lead the viewer's eye towards the subject that you're trying to focus on. So here's a picture I took in my neighborhood recently of a rainbow, right? And naturally the road leading away from, and even the power lines, which we're kind of trained not to see, bring your eye to that distance, right? So this helps sort of create a sense of energy, dynamicness to the photograph, and generally it's compelling to humans. And the last one, kind of doubling up here, that same middle example has got depth. Another easy example or an easy trick to do is when taking a photograph, make sure it's got some depth to it. Include objects in the foreground, middle ground, and background. So 4 easy rules to hopefully remember for you. Worst case, the one rule that I want to leave everybody with, because it has definitely bitten me in the butt before, is watch your background. When you're taking pictures or you're selecting pictures before you put them on your website, pay attention to what is in the background, to make sure that, one, it's not detracting from whatever it is you're trying to convey with your photograph, or too cluttered or anything like that. But also make sure there's nobody photobombing, no political signs that you don't want present, anything like that. So if nothing else, always take a look at the background of your photos before you post them online. All right, so narrowing it down from what makes a good image, what makes a good photo, to what makes a good image specifically for your website. Once you've got some images that you're like, these are awesome, right? How to decide whether they're actually images you should use on your website. So you want to think about whether these images convey a message or evoke an emotion, or stimulate action based on where you're trying to put them on your website, right? So if you're adding it to a blog post, or if you're adding it to your landing page, does it convey the message that you want? Does it convey the emotion that you want? Are you trying to get people excited? Are you trying to get people calm? Are you trying to get people to click? So these are all things to consider when picking the final image that you're going to put up online. A lot of the time, I like to think of it in the context of, does it help move the story along? And you might say, well, I'm creating a landing page where I'm selling widgets, or I've got a blog post where I'm showing some code or whatever, right? But still, analogously, you're trying to tell a story. You're trying to get people to click. You're trying to sell people something. You're trying to get your words across, right? And so, does this image help convey, or get, I keep using that word, does it help move the story along, right? Generally, for me, I think that for websites, images should stand on their own. And the other thing to make sure is that they're going to be evergreen, unless you've got a website where you're changing images all the time, right? It's not a bad thing to assume that this content might still be online in 5 years. 5 years feels like a very long time on the internet, but especially if it's like a blog post, you want it to be online for a long time. So you want your images to be evergreen. You don't generally want to use a meme. A meme might not make sense in a couple of years. And then I guess depending on what level of professionalism or the kind of language you want to convey on your website and whatnot. But generally, I try to stay away from GIFs. Yes, I pronounce them GIFs, or emojis. But you do you, right? The tone, the vibe, the language, your audience that you're trying to reach. So do what's best for them. But I do encourage you to think, again, big picture. How are these images going to be perceived in 5 years? And if my scrappy little business right now blows up to be a huge enterprise, am I still going to want this image somewhere on my website or archived along with my website? So a general easy way to summarize this is, why are you adding this image to this particular spot on your website? And does it contribute to the goal of the website? And sometimes we don't want to be so, corporate, so project management-y. But I still think it's important to think about, like, why am I creating this content, and how is this image contributing to it? Having said all that, when in doubt, the other thing to pay attention to anyway is trends that you're going to see on other websites, right? I include this in part just because I think it's always fascinating to see some of the image trends that you are seeing online when browsing lots of different websites like I do throughout the day. Especially because I am a product of the 80s and 90s. I think it's pretty funny, weird, circular, that a lot of 90s graphics have been coming back, along with fashion, which you may be seeing worn by people around you. I keep seeing graphic images that are these very abstract people, like the character in the middle here, very sort of bulbous, less literal humans, which is, I think, is an interesting take on what I said earlier about including human faces. And then the other trend that I keep seeing is these sort of fun, lighthearted, squiggly lines, even on pages where it's just text, but obviously in an attempt to add some sort of graphic element. I keep seeing these, bright colored shapes and stuff like that. So, a few random trends that I've noticed, but I think it's important that in the context of what makes a good image for your website, take a look at what other people are doing, see if it makes sense for you, see if there are trends that you want to fit into, but also are there trends that you want to go completely the opposite direction of? It might be an easy way to stand out. This might be the entire reason that you are currently attending my talk. So maybe I should have put this at the end, but where to find images online, I should have called this where to find good images online. So the first thing that I want to say, honestly, is we live in a day and age where you can create them yourselves. Either using a tool like Canva that has lots of clip art, or there are many other tools. They're all escaping me at the moment. But also we all walk around with pretty amazing cameras in our pockets, right? So if you're so inclined to show a photograph, to again convey a message, or to contribute to the content that you're putting on your website, take a picture, take your own picture. If you decide that you can't capture the subject that you want for your photograph, obviously most of us have heard of stock photography. Some of this costs money. There are places like websites that are very popular: Shutterstock, iStock, Adobe, Getty Images. These are all pretty popular stock photography websites, but most of them you're going to pay for. Okay. And then now in this day and age, again, I listed them up here because I have a feeling that a lot of people want this list in particular. There are now a lot of websites that offer free stock photography. Unsplash, Pexels, Pixabay, Stock Vault, Free Pick were kind of the top ones that I sometimes go to. And then ... AI, of course. We now live in a world where AI can generate images for us that are unique and individual. Results may vary. I've had good results with AI, but it's worth trying, right? And then I've found also that there are tools online. I couldn't find a good example minutes before presenting here, but creating infographics. The other thing that you can do actually is create, if you've got charts or graphs or tables that you want to show to make a point, take a screenshot, right? Like just open them in Google Docs or Microsoft Office, whatever you've got visuals in, take a screenshot and add that to your website. The one thing that I want to stress here, however, is not to forget about copyright and licensing. Whether the images are free or you pay for them, if you did not create them, you want to make sure that you have legal right to use them. So just a word to the wise, because I have seen people get sued over this kind of thing. Don't just go do a Google image search and right click and say copy and then insert it into your website. You can definitely get in trouble for that. Okay, so now we know what a good image is. We know what makes a good image online. We know where to find good images. Some of you might be saying, well, I write 1,500 word, 15,000 word blog posts. It's exhausting. It's time consuming. The last thing that I want to do is go find an image, especially when what I'm writing is the most important thing. And that might be true. But there's a number of reasons why I can't stress enough that it is necessary to add images, even if you're writing the next best-selling novel. Couple of key things to think about are SEO, if you want to be found, if you want Google to find you, and subsequently other people to find you and to read those words that you're writing. Images are going to be an important part of this. And then also user engagement. And here's a few stats that I'll throw at you. To get a website called HubSpot, big on small business marketing, quoted a study that said content with relevant images gets 94% more views than content without relevant images. So that means more views. A guy named John Medina, very smart gentleman, quoted a study saying, if you hear a piece of information, 3 days later, you'll remember about 10% of it. But if you add a picture, after 3 days, you'll remember 65% of it. So that's even just remembering facts. Having some sort of graphic image, some sort of image to go along with it, you're way more likely to remember it. So that's better retention. BuzzSumo, another really good online resource for this kind of stuff, quoted a study: articles with an image every 75 to 100 words, which sounds maybe a little high, but it receives double the social media shares of an article with fewer images. So that's more shares. And then if you're doing e-commerce or in general trying to sell something, Visual Website Optimizer, another really good website that I go to read their blog posts. They quoted a case study that saw a 40% increase in conversions when a product page is redesigned to feature fewer, larger images, right? So a few big, good images, even if, again, it's scattered throughout a wall of text, you're going to get more views, you're going to get better retention, you're going to get more shares. And if this is your goal, you're going to get more sales. So crucial. Let's talk about how WordPress itself uses images. Obviously, your mileage may vary here because different websites are set up very, very differently. Some people have websites that feature lots of images. WordPress out of the box features some images. Just kind of depends on the theme, depends on how you're using the website, stuff like that, right? But if you've created any sort of post, a page in WordPress, there's a thing called the featured image, right? And generally speaking, that's the number one, it's meant to be the number one image attached to any piece of content. And so it often, if you're looking at a blog post, it's often the big piece at the top. If you're looking at a homepage, some people might call it the hero section, right? It'll be the hero image. And the other place that it's often used that I have seen is often overlooked is WordPress calls them archive pages, but often if you've got a blog, right, you'll see a single blog post, but somewhere there is a page that has all of your blog posts stacked one on top of the other, or it might be masonry layout, right, side by side, but it's those featured images that are going to show next to each of those posts or on top of them. Sometimes they're the only thing that's shown. So that's pretty crucial. I've actually seen blog posts where you go to a single story, they don't show the featured image, but in order to get people to come to that story to read, they're going to show that image like on the homepage in a grid, that kind of thing. So, so don't discount all of the places that a featured image might be used. Also, the other thing that we're talking about is, let's say, a blog post or throughout a page, what we're going to call in-content images. So images throughout, like most stories, news stories, we think about, every few paragraphs, at least there's going to be some sort of photo. And then the other primary place that modern WordPress websites use images are what's called Open Graph. And I'm going to get into that a lot in a minute. But the takeaway for my point here is, even if you don't show featured images on your site, make sure that you at least think about adding one. Make sure that, because, well, a couple of things. One, again, open graph. So if somebody shares your website or web page, usually it's the featured image that's going to get shown. And you never know what you're going to do down the road, is the other thing I want to point out. I've started websites before that were nothing but text. But down the road, due to all of the points that I'm hopefully making successfully during this talk, saying that I decided that I needed to change my layout and add images. And boy, I was sorry that I hadn't already attached a featured image to every one of the posts that I'd created. So what makes good featured images and in content images? I've touched on some of this stuff, but just kind of to reiterate, make sure that it's relevant to the page that it's on. A lot of people will write a story and then they'll go, well, I need a picture of a smiling face or a person sitting at a computer working hard, stock photograph, because Corey said I needed an image. Well, at least give it a little thought to try to make it more context relevant than that. The other things you want to make sure your image has, make sure it's high quality. You don't want fuzzy. Fuzzy looks unprofessional and generally isn't going to convey the information that you want. Make sure the image is simple and helps move your story along. Another thing to make sure of is that the image is unique. Remember that if you are using stock photography, a lot of times, lots of people are going to be downloading those same images. So it's worth digging a little deeper to maybe find a photo that's a little more unique or a little more original, or again, go take your own. You do want to make sure that the image is consistent with your branding and site design. So if every one of your blog posts has a nice picture of humans interacting, hesitate to write one that suddenly has a cartoon, right? It's going to stand out. Maybe you want it to stand out, and so do it intentionally, but just be careful about, doing something completely different. And then the last thing that I like to talk about is A/B testing. So if you're trying to consider which of a bunch of images to use with some context, there's this thing called A/B testing, where you actually show each of a different or a different image to different people to see how they react and which one they like best, right? Sort of the group mindset. But I've had people push back on this and say, yeah, but A/B testing is complicated or technical or whatever. And here's the cheat code: ask your friends, right? Have them quick glance at a piece of content you've written, show them a handful of images and go, which one do you like best? If 3 of your friends pick out the same one, you're good to go. Twitter is really good for this too, by the way. All right, so some tech tips for featured images and in content images. Unfortunately, some of these add extra steps, a little extra time, but again, I promise it's worth it. Make sure that your image is the right format. So generally there are 2, 3, 4 types of image formats. Most of us have heard of JPEGs or PNGs. GIFs are still used occasionally, but usually more for something that's animated. JPEGs, quick rule, great for photos. Soft, complicated, real things in the real world, JPEG. If it's line or text, PNG. And there's this other thing now called WebP. Most of us are not actually like creating images in WebP. We're using services that automatically convert, But as long as you're JPEG or PNG, but with intention, you're good to go. Make sure your images are the right size. So you don't want an image that is 10,000 pixels almost ever, I promise you. Take a look at the theme you're using or the page that you're using an image on. You can make sure the image is a little bit bigger to make sure that it's high quality. So you don't want it to be too small either, but resize your image. Take the time to resize your image and make sure it's the right aspect ratio too. If your whole website uses 16:9 or square images, make sure that all of your images that you upload are the same 16 by 9 or square. Compress your images. So the easy cheat here, right? So there's highest quality images, and then there's ways to take a little bit of the quality out, which makes the file size decrease dramatically. And even in this day and age where we've all got super fast internet connections, that's not actually true. A lot of the world still does not. And you want your images to be delivered quickly, right? And then generally you're just doing the internet a favor by making your images smaller, because that also means your pages load faster, which Google does look at, and then humans care a lot about too. The easy way to do this is to use, I like a series of websites called compresspng.com, compressjpg.com. I drag my file there, it converts them, I download them, and that's what I upload. They are more or less like I have never been able to see the difference after I compress them, but usually they're smaller by upwards of 2/3. So it's just an easy extra step that saves a lot of space, bandwidth, that kind of thing. There's also local applications that you can use. Like there's one called Image Optim for the Mac. And then there's also actually WordPress plugins and services that you can use. You can go Google for those. The one last note here is don't forget about mobile, right? So you think to yourself, okay, I need to upload a nice big image. Maybe that's super tall and skinny because that's what my design looks like on desktop. Make sure you go look at it on your phone, and you might find that tall and skinny takes up the entire screen. Doesn't look good. So just don't forget to think about how things look on mobile. All right, so I've mentioned a bunch of times about this thing called Open Graph. What is Open Graph? Open Graph was this techie thing that Facebook created, and essentially the easy answer is it's a bunch of little pieces of information that describe a web page. So what you see on the screen is when I view the source of my website, OMGIMG.co. Whoops, that's not the second time I was going to mention it, but I'm not talking about it. If you look at the source of most websites, you will see things, meta tags, right? Things like description, and we've had those for decades. Relatively new is this thing that Facebook invented called Open Graph, which is the meta tags you see in the lower half of the screen. And these are tags that describe a website. Technically, this is often asked and often debated. Technically, this does not directly affect SEO. Google does not technically look at these at least at the moment, does not look at these and read this content and boost or knock down your website. So hard and fast rule today, as far as I understand, this does not affect SEO. Google does not care. However, the way that Open Graph tags are used ultimately gets you more clicks and gets your website interacted with more, which I'll explain in a minute. And Google does care about that. Google cares about the traffic going to your website because they view that as authority. So technically, there is a small SEO impact of Open Graph. So then within Open Graph, what are Open Graph images? This is why we're here. This is what people see, and most of you have experienced this, and maybe some of you haven't even thought about where this comes from. But when somebody shares your website on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Pinterest, often a little summary of your website comes up with an image. That is an Open Graph image. Often it is the same, if we're talking about a WordPress blog post, often it is the same image as your featured image. And a lot of people just assume that they are one and the same. And sometimes they are, but they don't have to be. We'll talk about that more in a second. But high level, what are Open Graph images? Open Graph images are how you are perceived pretty much anytime you're shared on the internet, which is huge because in this day and age, a lot of us get more traffic and more attention on socials than on our actual website. All right, so what makes a good Open Graph image? Again, a lot of the time, the same image is used for both the featured image and the Open Graph image. And here's why. If you install an SEO plugin, Yoast or Squirrely or Rank Math or any of them, almost all of them will default to using the featured image as the Open Graph image. But almost all of them have a place where you can set a separate Open Graph image. And here's why you need to do that. It should be different. What you see in front of you on my slide here is on the left, a default image, right? If you go to a blog post where I wrote an article about the mountain that I climbed, seeing the mountain and then seeing my title, the mountain I climbed, and then reading about it, you get it. There's context. You're like, this is the mountain that he climbed. There's the picture, right? But if somebody shares that article and you see, as it's shared on, in this case, LinkedIn on the left, what is the context of that picture of the mountain? You have no idea. You squint and you go, oh, the title might be the mountain that Corey climbed, but like it's hard to read, it's vague, and most importantly, Twitter changed this year and no longer shows the title of the article or any other information. It's just the image. So using a plugin like OMGIMG, there's my little plug, but you can also use tools like Canva or Photoshop. It's so crucial now to add information to an image and use that as a dedicated Open Graph image. So here's an example on the right that I used OMGIMG to create, taking that same mountain picture. I shouldn't have said the mountain I climbed. Let's pretend the article is about why your featured images matter. I've superimposed the title. I've added a quote. I've added a link. And so now somebody scrolling at 2 a.m. on Twitter, on LinkedIn, whatever, is going to see that image, but they're going to have context. And that's crucial in this day and age if you're trying to get people to click through to your website. So that is, to me, the most important thing of what makes a good Open Graph image. Tech tips for Open Graph images. You'll have heard some of this before. Make sure it's in the right format. Depending on who's using it, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, what have you, they might convert it to their own fanciness, but it's still better for you to upload the right format. So JPEG if it's a photo, PNG if it's a graphic. Something that is crucial here is in the Facebook standard of Open Graph, they declared that images need to be 1200 by 630, and subsequently LinkedIn and Pinterest count on the image being that size. So make sure that you resize it to 1200 pixels by 630 pixels. I created a neat little website called crop.express that makes this really easy, but you can also use Photoshop or any other image software. Crop.express is free, by the way. So that's not a plug. That's just a tip. I just happened to make the website. Again, make sure you compress your images. The internet will thank you. And then the one funny quirk to this is Twitter always having to be different. Oh, excuse me, X. They made their own Open Graph standard called the Twitter card. They actually declared that their images should be 800 by 418 pixels, just to be different. But the truth is if you upload an Open Graph image, they will still consume it and show it correctly. So it saves you an extra step. I'm over by 5 minutes, so I apologize for hurrying, but here we are at the final success declaration of everything that we have learned in this half an hour. What are the high level takeaways? Compelling images, beautiful, amazing, interesting images that are optimized for the web, compress them, resize them, what have you, and make sure that they are optimized for your website. Make sure that they are contextually relevant, beautiful, whatever that means, right? Maybe include your branded colors, all that kind of stuff, but make sure that they make sense in the context where you put them on your website. And that these images are going to be used for WordPress, within WordPress, on your website, but also maybe more crucially in this day and age for Open Graph, meaning when they are shared on socials, this is how you are perceived. Woohoo for picturing success. I am once again Corey Maass. Thank you very much for listening to me for the last half hour. If you want to get in touch, I'm always just on email, and I'm happy to accept personal emails. So you can email me at corey@omgimg.co. And then I am also very active on Twitter at Corey Maass. Thank you for listening.